What happens when a guy from the city accidentally contacts a guy from the country? It's not what you think. They strike up a conversation and same difference is created. JD and Kory talk the whole gamut of life as they each see it through the prism of race. One is a 6'4" black man and one is a 5'4" white man. Tune in and find out which is which. Agree or disagree, they will make you think, strike emotional chords, and more. Stick around. You might just learn something. Welcome to Same Difference with your hosts, JD and Kory. We're sharing our stories and how our stories impacted our approach to life. We take our perspectives into having dialogue about real life topics. Welcome back, everybody. It is time to start a new episode of Same Difference Podcast with me, Kory May, and the good doctor, JD Mass. Doctor, how are you?
I'm doing well, Kory. I think we forgot what episode we're on, huh? That's all right.
Me too. Clueless.
Somewhere in around the 20 mark or 21.
Right. Somewhere around there. We'll get it right for the next one. But we've
fine.
had
Let's
some
be
ups and
human
downs.
today.
We've had some ups and downs, and I think we're both a little bit out of sorts. But before we get into all that, let's say thanks to the good people at VPR Radio, DJFMI,
and Kiana the Goddess. We love you guys. We appreciate you guys. And we are here doing this because you helped us kick us in the butt and say, get this thing started. So
absolutely
cannot thank you enough.
Right. I have been grateful or re-examining the idea of gratefulness because, as you know, and some of our listeners may know, because of of other social media, my best friend and mentor passed away on March 4th. He was 1 week away from being 68 years old. His name was David Lewis Kaplan. I didn't know him as David. I knew him as Dave. And I am grieving and mourning in unexpected ways. And that's been where my headspace has been. So I don't remember what episode we are because this is bigger than all that.
And it happened the day after we recorded the last episode.
Right.
I recall you telling me afterwards that he was, kind of on his last leg, and you were being told it could be any moment now. And the next day you said that he was gone.
Thank you for remembering that fact because one was just lost.
Yeah.
I may be doing a lot of talking today, and
the floor
wherever you feel like jumping in, please do. Part of the thing that makes this relationship special to me, and special probably in a global sense, is that Dave was Jewish. And some people say that there is stress between the Black community and the Jewish community. I prefer not to see it that way. I see us as allies with a common border. And I felt as a human being that Dave was as fine a man as I have ever known. He was 11, 12 years older than I am, which meant that's 3 presidential cycles. And he was definitely and firmly a baby boomer. I have never not been able to rely on Dave. And even now, a lot of times I still use present tense with regard to Dave instead of using past tense. There's a part of me that doesn't believe he's gone. Every so often I look at my phone and expect to get a text from him with gotcha. He pulled off the greatest prank ever. And he's just been so good to me all the time. So let's go back to the very beginning. How his family and my family met. This was all before I was born. But we had mulberry bushes at the back of our property. And next door to my childhood home, which is still standing, is an elementary school, Roosevelt Elementary School. And then, so let's see, my house to the north of that, of our house, there was a row of mulberry bushes. To the west of my house is Roosevelt Elementary. Northwest of that was a ravine, and then across that street, which was Greenwood Drive, was Dave's house. In the spring and late summer, those mulberry bushes were heavy and quite tasty.
Yes.
Dave selected a particular day to come over and harvest some as a child. And so he ate a whole bunch of the low hanging fruit. And then he climbed up higher and gorged himself on more low hanging fruit. When he was, and this has been confirmed by both my mother and by Dave, when his little gorged belly was full, he lay down in the grass because he was stuffed. And that's where my mother found him, a small white child with purple hands and purple face in the middle of her yard. uh, and she approached him cautiously. Again, this is the 1960s, and to find a small white child in your yard could be
Right.
troubling.
Right.
My mother walks up and says, "Little boy, do your parents know where you are?" And yeah, of course, they're right over there. And he points at his house. And so my mom walked him back home, and that's where mom met Dave's parents. That would be Dr. Richard Kaplan and Ellen, his mother, who happened to be a librarian here in Iowa City. I didn't know Dave as a child, and I didn't know Joel, his younger brother, but I was acquainted with Daniel, the third child, who was several years older than I am. But I knew him because of my sister was in orchestra and Daniel was a gifted musician. And then Joel, the youngest, who was a couple years older than my sister, that same sister, was also a gifted musician, as well as he came back and did a magic show at Roosevelt, my elementary school. So there's weavings between the families. Ellen, Dave's mom, happened to be my high school librarian at Iowa City West High. And I just knew the family. And in a town this size, you know everybody. Or it's kind of like the Kevin Bacon game. You're one or two, maybe three relations away from knowing somebody who knows somebody. And with us being one of the black families in town, if you didn't know us personally, you knew us by reputation, appearance, things like that. As I've talked about, I went to college my freshman year at Morehouse. And when I came back in the summer of '86, I was looking for a job. And Dave owned a comic store here in town. First, it was called Sensational Comics. Then it became Barfuncles. And Barfuncles had comics, baseball cards, posters, t shirts, art supplies, like models that you could build. It was just one of those cool places that you could go hang out and buy stuff that fed your hobby addictions. There was a sign, help wanted. I jumped in on that. And I worked with Dave for several years. Now, here's the thing about Dave. Let me get this out early. Dave lived in at this intersection, and this is a metaphorical intersection, at the intersection of belief in human beings and time. So he believed that people were the greatest resource for solving any problem. And also, time was the most valuable commodity that anyone had. So he would invest in you and see what would happen. And if nothing happened, hey, you were still in his orbit, but he wouldn't spend as much time with you. But if you responded, he would spend more time with you and pour himself into you. And he would ask you questions and want to be involved in your life. And before I had children, this was before I was moving to Washington, D.C. So I've worked with him from 86 until 88 or 89 when he sold his share in Barfunkel's, but we still connected over comic books and things like that. And then when I would go to when I left for Washington D.C., he said, I want you to stay in touch, and he would, and I did. When you're in your mid 20s, having a mentor is a kind of touch and go thing because you think you're smart enough to navigate the world all by yourself without any mentors training wheels, and you don't necessarily understand that if you listen to your mentor, the mentor will show you a better path than some of the paths that you choose for yourself. Sometimes I did not feel like I was worthy of Dave's attention, but he would constantly reinforce, yes, you are, yes, you are, yes, you are. That's where he introduced me to Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends and Influence People. And we would talk about those books consistently. When I got married, that was in the 99? No, wait. 98.
1998 or 18?
Oh, you got jokes now. Okay. 1998. Um, no, maybe it was 2000.
Whatever it was great.
Thanks. Um, Dave was my best man, and he was rock solid. He was an absolute rock solid guy, rock solid for me. And the coolest part about it was he took an interest to my two kids that I had before I got married. That would be Xavier and Madeline. And then when Olivia, Kyle, and Zachary arose, he cared for them as though they were his family too. Now, Dave had two children of his own, and his two kids. Again, I was I was around when Dave and Joni had Benjamin, and Ben is the older of his two kids. But my babies, Dave was godfather to them, all of them. Now, when I moved back after, go ahead.
All five or all three of
All
the
five.
all
All
five?
five. He cared about my babies just every time, asking how they were doing in school, what's new with them, how are they navigating in the world, what's meaningful to them. And my children, um, and I'm going to put most of this on youth, don't, uh, how should I say this? Because it's, I guess I didn't do a good enough job explaining how important Dave was to me all the time. But whenever the kids would come to Iowa City, Dave would show up and say, "Hey, how are you? I've been friends with your dad for forever." And at some point, it all kind of clicked how important Dave was. It's not like having the relative that's that you would see every week, but they would see Dave somewhat consistently whenever they would come to Iowa City. Let's see. Whenever one of the best things that we would do would be he was very wise in terms of collectibles, so baseball cards, comic books, antique glass, antiques all around. He has a store in Kelowna, Iowa, which is about 15, 20, 25 minutes outside. You could call it a suburb if you wanted to. I wouldn't be upset with that. Um, there was we'd go down to his store and talk stuff, just sit around and talk. And the wealth of knowledge that he had about collectibles was wild. And it leads me to, let me hop off this beaten path for a minute. It's when we use the term common knowledge is a subset, because we can all agree that there are some things that should be common knowledge, but everybody has a level of expertise outside of that, and what we can assume as our life knowledge isn't necessarily common knowledge to someone else. And
Mhm.
that'll come back in a minute. Whenever Dave and I get together, it's talking about collectibles. This is sort of a common knowledge conversation for us because he's an expert. I'm a wannabe expert on comics and things like that. This is what he invested his life into, and this is what where his knowledge went. And he was well versed in conversations on many, many things. And about that, I appreciate him. But when we would get around people that didn't know anything about comics, sometimes we'd have to have that, oh, wait a second, these folks don't know anything about comics, and this is all brand new, and they don't know anything about baseball cards. So having an entirely new conversation about collectibles and the market therein, uh, they're not going to get it. Dave taught me economics based on using the secondary market for collectibles. So you remember there was you might be too young to remember this, Beanie Babies.
Oh yeah, I remember Beanie Babies.
Beanie Babies were the greatest hustle ever made. $1.50 beanbag toy that you could pick up almost anywhere. And then the secondary market just explodes. There's Beanie Baby conventions, Beanie Baby supplies, Beanie Baby price guides. And there's this active economic secondary market just churning. And
Was
go ahead.
was that what led into, like, from Garbage Pail Kids or Garbage Patch Kids or whatever, to the other things that started to become collectible items? Did it start with Beanie Babies
Oh,
as
no,
toys
no.
that way?
Mm-mm. No, 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 no. Oh my gosh. Um, the collectible market has started. It's as long as people have had possessions, there's always been some assigned value
Mm,
to whatever the possession was, right? And sometimes people didn't care what it was, and if there was no market for it, it just was dead, right? So we'll jump back real quick. um, Everybody had cast iron skillets in my
right,
grandparents' community. Everybody, Griswold, Wagner, whatever. And at some point, people stopped caring about them. And then there were nostalgic members. Well, people would get rid of them, $5, $10. And then people my age and older started remembering how important they were and the quality of iron that went into them. So there became a secondary market.
right.
Well, now all of a sudden, fueled by your childhood memories of your granny cooking a slab of bacon and a dozen eggs in a cast iron skillet, 16, number 16. Oh, I got to have one of those. Well, some of them went to the landfill, some of them got melted down, whatever.
Right.
And now you've got this smaller market looking for a small supply and a large market. Boom, prices
Mhm.
go up. It happens all over the place. Kids did it with baseball cards. Kids did it with comic books.
Yeah, that part I understood. And I guess baseball cards was well before Beanie Babies. So yeah, but some of these things were kind of made with limited supply to create that from the jump
Right.
versus something that became nostalgic because technology or times moved on thinking that this was better because it was newer.
But garbage pail kids had been around, or something, a precursor had been around since I was a kid. Now they might have come back in the late
Mhm.
90s, early thousands. But this was watching Beanie Babies was just this explosion because it wasn't just kids, it wasn't just boys who were doing this. This was housewives,
This was the Pokemon became that of the technology, right?
right? I mean, all of a sudden, just watching this thing explode, and
Yeah.
it was no longer just, as a lot of people look at comic books or baseball cards as greasy kids stuff. This began to appeal to suburban women, and the guy, who the manufacturer Ty was genius because this covered man, woman, child, non-binary, whomever. It covered everybody. These appealed to everybody. And when you start to see that craze begin on a just out of nowhere, and you see the life cycle of it within your lifetime, pow. So Dave and I talked about beanies, and at the time I was working at a place where I could get a hold of some, and sometimes I would pick them up and send them to Dave. Sometimes Dave would say, be on the lookout for. And
Mhm.
we would be having these conversations. So I'm learning economics using children's toys. And I mean, it was even beyond. I mean, I'd taken econ classes in college, but when you're actually seeing it in motion, that's absolutely wild. And he was just my friend, mentor, econ teacher. Here's what you need to look for. This might be generation one. This might be generation two. This might be generation three. And for some people, this is going to be absolutely boring. But when you can start to frame principles of economics in very simple terms, it
Yeah.
sticks. It sticks. You can talk about moving the supply curve and all that sort of stuff and in class, and okay. But when you see it happening and have somebody guiding you through that, absolutely fascinating. And I was grateful for this to happen. Uh, when my marriage fails, Dave is still my best man. And whenever we would go and I moved back to Iowa, we would see each other very, very regularly. And Dave would call me up. Let's go for a ride. Okay. Don't have anything better to do. Let's go. And Xavier and Maddie are with me. It's 2006. We've moved back here. And I'm trying to take them out and have them learn some of these econ things the same way. And my kids used to get so mad at me. So Saturday morning, let's go garage sailing. And we're not going to go out with thousands of dollars or anything, but I'm saying, let's go visit some garage sales. I want your eyes as children as to what would be cool, and let's what would be cool to pick up and why. And we're also going to do this in my little battered minivan. Here is an atlas or a map of Iowa City. You have to guide me there through the using the map. And my kids were so mad at me because I was teaching them how to use a map. And while I'm teaching them how to use a map, I'm still trying to express to them economics and have real world examples. Dad, why do we need this? Because we can just punch everything into a GPS. I said, what happens if your phone dies? You need to be able to read a map and navigate how to do this. Dad, I'm going to tell mom. And you're telling mom what? Well, that you're going to make us do this. I'm like, this is for your own benefit. I know how to navigate around. I know how to read a map. If you don't know how to read a map, that's problematic. You need to be able to read a map. Grounding these things in real world examples. And that was what Dave always did with me, was ground abstract concepts into real world applications. Dave stepped in my life as best friend, best man, godfather to my kids, a brother, mentor, stepped in as a dad figure for me for a while. And I owe him so much. And so whenever we would go on one of these trips, road trips, would just be me and Dave after Xavier leaves and Maddie leaves. Um, they Maddie decides to move back to live with her mom out east, and Xavier is sometimes visiting his mom during the summertime, or conversely, he's out doing his own thing. So I'm spending time with Dave. Want to go for a ride? Let's go. Where are we going? And we'd go do something. Just just hang out. And in those conversations, he's always asking about the children. He's always wondering what am I up to. And anytime he would ask me if I want to go for a ride, I'd always be like, yeah, let's go. Because I knew one of two things was going to happen. One, either I was going to have a great adventure, or I was going to have a story. And you can't turn down the opportunity to do that. Afterwards, he would always ask me, did you have a good time? And I would always tell him, time with you is time well spent. And during that time that I've talked about, Dave had 4 different bouts of cancer. He had a bone marrow transplant and a kidney transplant. So by the time we're moving up to the last 4 or 5 years, he's starting to he's starting to wear down. And what Dave always did was bounce back from those medical traumas. That was who he was. He was a fighter, and I always expect Dave to bounce back. So March 3rd, as you had alluded to earlier, I'm not really believing that this is on death watch,
Right.
because I think he's going to pull out another last minute drive. There's going to be more walk off shot. There's going to be one more last second jump shot from 3-point land, and there wasn't. And talking about messing with your head, this guy who consistently pulls out these miracles is not able to do it. And now it's the reality of grief. And it's before he died, I did a lot of crying. And now it's all about how big the presence that he has in my life, and how present he was, and now it's about the absence and what comes next. What's going to fill in there? And I pick up my phone and I want to text him or call, and it's right at the end of that thought, like, he's not here. And that's the thing that just gets me over and over again, that I have to be confident in my judgment and the everything that he poured into me,
Right.
is that he's still here. He's still
Right.
here. He's still
That
with me.
you can tap into sort of a what would Dave say? What would Dave do?
Right. And this is really weird because, and I'm only going to speak for men, and a subset of that, we don't know how to grieve. That's, oh, we don't know how to grieve. And that lack of knowledge is killing us. After the funeral, so Dave dies on a Monday. It was the Thursday afterwards that there was the funeral, and I was able to sit. Oh, what's the term? Oh my gosh.
Shiva.
Yeah, sit Shiva. That's a Thursday. Thank you. Thank you. You have no idea. I was getting that confused with Shabbat. Yeah, sitting Shiva. Shiva on Thursday. And if we understood Judaism a little bit better, or better entirely, it would make more sense to, we might not see so much anti-Semitism. I love the idea that there's mourning for 7 days, where you get together, you eat, you pray, you share stories, and then do it again the day after, and the day after, and the day after, and the day after. Because when we grieve, grief is universal. How we grieve is not. And I was as humble as a lost coyote pup in the wilderness that day. I shut my mouth and opened up my ears, and I didn't know what was going on. And then instead of trying to impose, like, hey, this is how we do it as Christians, I shut up and I listened. And I asked questions, and the questions were answered with affection and warmth. It wasn't like, oh, you should know this already. It was, again, I was talking about common knowledge. This wasn't common knowledge to me. This was common knowledge to the family, and to other Jews that were around. And that made it, the lack of condescension, the appreciation for my curiosity, made a tremendous difference. And I feel closer to the family because I'm going through this with you, and I'm doing this with fresh eyes. And as an observer, it was okay. It was okay. Now, uh, again, this is an immersion moment. When you're reading in Shiva, um, there's Hebrew. I can't read it, and I don't know what's being said. I'm just, I you've got the black book of mourning, and there you go. I had a relative was put his hand on my shoulder, and you know,
A
we're
relative, Dave.
yeah, relative of Dave puts his hand on my shoulder, and I'm stuck on a page, and I'm bewildered because I'm like, I got nothing. The only thing that I can recognize on this is the page number in the lower right hand corner. That's all I can read. And the book is being read normally English. You read right to left and top to bottom. The book is flipped the other way, and so you're reading left to right, or is it right to left? No, I think you're reading right to left, but it's opening the opposing way. I didn't know. I didn't know. But the gentleness of the instruction and the inclusivity of the moment made me feel welcome.
Yeah. Well, you approached it with curiosity, which is to approach something new. And welcomeness is an important feeling, especially in a time of grief.
So now the sensitivity being on the adjacent to the family, oh, it gives me some insight. Now, I mean, I would love for us to understand cultures in ways that we can approach things with sensitivity, both sides. I wasn't looking for this in terms of some sort of anthropological case study. Like, look at these people and their culture. No, it's more along the lines of, I get it.
Hmm.
I get
You
it.
get to learn something new. Yeah, that there's more ways to express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Let-
Oh, Lord. Let's take it one step further. There are so many cultures, well, that share common things. Like, so many cultures share the gift of storytelling. I wish that Americans had rituals of manhood, such as and womanhood, such as the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah. We see them in other cultures, um, in Africa and South America, where when it is time for you to become a man, there are things that you must do. We don't have that here in
you
Western
mean
culture.
Sweet 16 isn't a
Well, but I'll go so far as to say the quinceañera seems much more grounded than the cotillion. Although I see in the cotillion the vestiges of that. I think Sweet
uh,
16 has kind of become commercialized,
of course it has.
and it's not that step forward into a newer, more mature way of thought and behavior. I think it's again, I think it's become
Of
commercialized.
course it has.
I would wish that there were so many more organized ways that you pull people from their childhood into adulthood, such that there's uh, visible and meaningful growth that happens, so that we can be proud of our heritage, we can be proud of who we are, but that time, whatever age or grouping that was, we are the access to being grown more uh formalized, more ritualized. Here it's like, hey, you're 18, sign up for the draft, you can vote, and
Yeah.
get out. At 21 you can drink, but there's not that whole process of
No, it's individualistic, right? So
right,
everything
right,
is, it's on you. It's on you. It's on your parents, and it's not on us as a society.
right,
Everybody
right.
needs to listen to Brenda's Got a Baby.
There's missing that as a culture. And even for the grief, we don't know how to grieve in Western society. It's like there's something lost in the idea that we kind of like, okay, you're 16, you're grown up, or you're 18, you're grown up, you're thrown out there. Now what? And instead of cultures coming together and saying, hey, here are some rituals that we do in order to Here's what you have should have studied prior to this. Here are some acts of service. Strike that. Two that might have had some opportunities for that: Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and in terms of service and preparing people for the world. But both have been tarnished by some opportunities of segregation, some socioeconomics that on that as well, that prevent barriers. Sometimes, quote unquote, it's not as cool to be in those positions of service as
Well, very little that's cool for that's good for us is cool.
right,
Mm,
right.
like that is the trickery of the culture at the worst.
So grieving,
Hmm.
I don't think people know how to grieve because they haven't been taught maturely how to grieve, right?
Right, for sure. I wish psychology and sociology were implemented from elementary, like kindergarten on through, because they kind of are taught, but it doesn't taught contextually how we grow and develop with those things. It's like, you know, again, everything's so much individualistic. And because
Right.
of that, we don't learn how to support one another, which grief needs some support.
Yes.
And we aren't taught not to respond to others' reactions who may not be directly, those reactions may not be directly towards something that's happening, but towards something that they've put in a box emotionally or whatnot. And it becomes very challenging. And then, we just need to learn to come together and support much more.
Well, you're nailing this in the direction that I wanted to get there. And it was individually versus your community. And if a pillar of your community dies, there's an absence there. And
Mhm.
people die every day, obviously. And those folks may very well not be the pillar of the metropolitan community, but in their family, they may very well be the tent pole that's holding the whole dadgum thing up. And with that absence, that community is feeling a loss. We should be working on behalf of that community because, hey, individualism is fine in context, but that would assume that you're all independent. We're all independent and we need nothing from anybody else. And all of our needs are met by ourselves, as opposed to
Which
you are part of a community. You drink water that comes from a community. You are breathing, you're using roads that are part of a community. Why are we suddenly seeking to dismantle all aspects of a community when a community gets together to celebrate the birth of a child, to celebrate the achievements of a young adult, to celebrate the marriage of a young adult, and then that family expanding, creating another community or adding to the community, and ultimately grieving and mourning the loss of someone who is integral to that community. They don't have to be at odds.
right. So this idea of independence is one of the most sickening, destructive ideas that we have, because there is no, if you do not contextualize it as independent of this, there is no this striving to be independent. There is no such thing. You will never get there. We have to be dependent on flowers, on plant life to even breathe. So we're already dependent on the earth for water and food and things of that nature. You didn't grow your own food. You didn't, you know, grow your own cotton and make your own clothes. And you didn't do all of these things. So we are automatically, no matter how much we try to remain as independent as we can be, we are automatically dependent on others. Businesses don't run without being dependent upon their customer base as well as their staff. And like we are dependent on each other. And the fact that we can't enjoy and embrace that and value servicing each other and serving each other and sharing with each other and supporting one another is really what's tearing us apart. And then when we don't get those things and we have to grieve alone, that is just
Right.
debilitating where it could be uplifting and strengthening.
Right. So being admitted into the community who loved Dave, and I was always in the community, but having them wrap themselves around me was wonderful. I was a pallbearer, and I gave a eulogy as well. And the eulogy was resonant. Members of the family said, "You captured Dave's spirit," which was the highest praise that anybody could ever give a speaker or a storyteller, is that you captured the essence of Dave. You had some of his mannerisms down pat. And in this supposedly somber moment, they laughed because they saw their loved one immortalized by someone outside of their family, and seeing him in a different perspective. It was good. It was good. And I'm not usually one to want to think about funerals being good, but again, it was beautiful. It was moving. And I've contacted his widow and his son and his daughter. Now, here's another joy. Dave, when Ben, his son, wanted to learn to speak better, Dave suggested, "Well, hey, Kory's here. He's in Toastmasters, and he's one of the best. Why don't you join his club?" Dave called up and said, "Hey, Ben's interested." I said, "By all means, without any hesitation, come on in. We're going to help you get better." And it was a personal favor that he trusted his child, who's a grown ass man, into my care so that he could improve. There's no way I wouldn't do that. There's no way that I wouldn't be of service. Here's another part. Shoshana, his daughter, is pregnant. And that baby will never meet his grandpa or their grandpa. And I feel like I can't be Dave, but I can be adjacent. And so when the little one arrives, how can I be of service and how can I help? That's what I want to do. I want to do that.
Yeah. And we need more of that. And so kudos. And I mean, there were several people outside of my family because I haven't lost anybody of like tremendous closeness within my family. So I've never experienced that level of grief. But my best friend's grandmother, my tennis coach, and my baseball coach, who were very instrumental in my growth and development, my baseball coach was also my close friends from elementary school, parent, father. And so, you know, carrying them with me, having wanted them to see my success and know that they contributed to that,
Right.
was definitely something that I carried around. Like, I'm one of my greatest regrets. I did a speech at Ma's funeral, which was my best friend's grandmother, and it was a powerful speech. I felt really good about it. Welcoming, she welcomed me into their home, gave me a sense of welcoming never had, and I told myself from time to time, JD, type this speech out, because I literally hand wrote it and took my notebook up. And I carried that notebook in my backpack with me because of that speech, because of keeping her close. And that backpack was stolen in an event I'll talk about some other time.
Mm.
But oh boy, do I regret it. Like now I'm running back. Hey, did anybody, was that thing filmed by any chance? And, I would have loved to put that speech in my book. I did
Right.
talk about her. Obviously, I have a chapter dedicated to my coaches, but I would, that was the essence. And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
I want to carry it on. I mean, right. I want to be a part of it. It's his birthday today, my best friend, and I'm going to, hopefully they're having a barbecue, and I'm going there, and
Love it.
yeah.
So for all
Yeah.
of our people out there, if you ever have the opportunity to do a eulogy, prepare for it. Taking it from someone who does storytelling as a profession and who has done some professional speaking, prepare for it. Write it down, save it.
Yeah.
Save it, save it, save it. Here's another thing, too. Practice it and do not just try to wing it.
Yeah.
No, 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 no. I have as somebody who does this professionally, just prepare, because there will be people afterwards who want that speech. I want a copy of that, or I want a recording of it, or I want something because you captured the essence of my loved one, and this brought me comfort when I needed it. I get it, JD. I completely understand. And you can replace that backpack, but no one knows the value of that
That
notebook.
one sheet of paper on that notebook, right?
Oh,
Oh gosh.
my heart breaks for you on that one, my
Yeah.
friend. Mm.
Yep. That computer that was in it, and I even had a first draft of like outline of an entire book, which would have been much different than the book that I wrote. So on that too. But in that other notebook with just that speech in it, Lord, do I.
Mhm. I get it.
Yeah.
So, people, what we talked about today was about grief and about the love that people have for their lost ones. I'm going to make one request of you beyond the one that I did about preparation for a funeral. If you feel distant and estranged from somebody, see about mending that fence and trying to talk to them. And if it's just simply a friend that you lost track of and there's no animus, just reach out and contact them and say, "Hey, I was thinking about you today." It's going to
Yeah.
make a difference in their world. It's going to make a difference in your world. And you may very well end up talking for 3 or 4 hours, or you may just get back a note. Thank you for thinking of me. But don't delay, because you don't know. You just don't know. And I miss my best friend so much every day. JD.
Yeah. Well, our condolences, I'll speak for everybody listening, and our love and prayers. And reach out, shoot us some thoughts about this one, and send some support, and find people to support and check in with who have lost someone, not just as you mentioned in your grief piece on your own. Uh, um, I don't know if podcast is the right thing to say or whatnot that you do on Facebook, but it's not just at the time that they need it. It's all of the time. It's
Right.
from this time forward. Like, reach out and check on people, because you'll see that they'll be missing. I got friends that are missing their loved ones that have been gone for years. And like I said, I still miss and wish that some of them were experiencing seeing me do certain accomplishments. So
Right.
reach out to each other. I mean,
And here we go. One more parting shot. Time spent with you is time well spent.
yeah.
Be the person that someone says that to, and
Mhm.
be the person that says that to someone else. Time with you is time well spent.
Absolutely.
Doctor, it's almost an hour.
Yes.
We
And
done here, you think?
we can leave them at this.
Very good.
Follow us. Go to the website, samedifference.life. Send us an email, same difference broadcast at gmail.com. Keep supporting us, sharing these episodes with others, and share some stories with us. I love you, brother, and
Love you right back.
we will see you next time.
Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of Same Difference. We hope this journey through unique connections and diverse perspectives has left you with fresh insights and a broader understanding of the world we share.
We're humbled by your support and enthusiasm for the incredible stories and discussions we've shared. And remember, our mission is to foster critical thinking, embrace new perspectives, and spark conversations that bring us closer to an equitable world.
So, if you've enjoyed our podcast, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us reach even more listeners.
And if you have a story to share or a topic you'd like us to explore, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're always looking for new voices and fresh perspectives to feature on Same Difference.
Until next time, remember that our shared humanity is our most powerful asset, and by working together, we can bring about positive change.
Stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep making a difference. Thank you for being a part of Same Difference.
Take care, everyone. See you in the next episode.